Jack Morrison hadn't spoken to another person in 6 days. That was normal for him now. The silence of the Colorado mountains had become his only companion, and he preferred it that way. At 52 years old, he'd built a life of solitude in a cabin so remote that even the mail carrier refused to make the trip. But on this particular morning, as Jack tried to lift a cast-iron skillet with his right arm, pain shot through his shoulder like lightning. He'd fallen 2 weeks ago while fixing the roof, and the injury wasn't healing the way it should. The skillet slipped from his grip and clattered onto the wooden floor, leaving a dent he'd have to fix later. If he could fix it. If he could do anything with this useless arm. He stood there in his kitchen, breathing hard, staring at the skillet like it had personally betrayed him. This wasn't the first thing that had gone wrong. The cabin was falling apart around him. Loose floorboards, a leaking roof, firewood running low. Winter was coming fast to the Rockies, and Jack knew he was in trouble. Real trouble. The sound of a truck engine broke through his thoughts. Jack's jaw tightened. He knew that truck. His brother Tom appeared on the porch moments later, not bothering to knock before walking in. That's what families do, apparently. They show up uninvited and refuse to take hints. Tom took one look at Jack and shook his head. "You look terrible." "Good morning to you too," Jack muttered, bending awkwardly to pick up the skillet with his left hand. "How's the shoulder?" Tom asked, though his tone said he already knew the answer. "Fine." "That's why you're using your wrong hand to pick up a pan?" Tom pulled out a chair and sat down without being asked. "Jack, this has gone on long enough. You can't take care of yourself up here. Not like this." Jack felt his chest tighten. "I'm managing. You're not." Tom's voice got firmer. "Look around. When's the last time you cleaned this place? When's the last time you ate something that wasn't canned soup? That shoulder needs proper care and you need help." "I don't need anything." Jack turned away, pretending to busy himself with the coffee pot. There was a long silence. Then Tom spoke quietly. "It's been 3 years, Jack. 3 years since the accident. 3 years since Jack had been leading a hike with his daughter Lily and a group of other teenagers through these same mountains. 3 years since the rock slide that took her away from him in seconds. She'd been 16 years old, full of dreams about becoming a park ranger just like her dad. She'd wanted to protect the wilderness to help people discover its beauty safely. Instead, Jack had failed to keep her safe. The one job a father has, and he'd failed. "Don't," Jack said sharply. "You can't hide up here forever," Tom continued. "Lily wouldn't want this for you. Don't you dare tell me what she'd want." Jack's voice cracked despite his effort to control it. Tom stood up and put a hand on Jack's good shoulder. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. At least let me bring someone to cook and clean a couple times a week, just until your shoulder heals. No, I already know someone who needs the work. Elena Rodriguez. Her husband died about 1.5 years ago. Cancer. She's got a teenage son and she's struggling to make ends meet. You'd actually be helping her out." Jack wanted to refuse again, but something in Tom's words made him pause. Another widow. Another person who understood loss. Not that it mattered. He didn't want understanding. He didn't want company. He didn't want anything except to be left alone with his guilt. But his shoulder throbbed, reminding him that pride wouldn't keep him alive through winter. "Twice a week," Jack finally said. "That's it. She cooks some meals I can reheat, does basic cleaning, then leaves. No conversation. No trying to fix me. This is just business." Tom looked relieved. "I'll bring her by tomorrow so you two can meet." After Tom left, Jack stood at the window watching the dust from his brother's truck fade into the trees. He immediately regretted agreeing. Having someone in his space, in his cabin, touching his things, it felt wrong. This place was his fortress, the only place where he didn't have to pretend he was okay. He walked slowly to the closed door at the end of the hallway. Lily's room. He hadn't opened it in 3 years. Couldn't. Inside were all her things, exactly as she'd left them. Her hiking boots by the bed. Her journals full of observations about wildlife and plants. Her drawings of the mountains she'd loved. Jack pressed his palm against the door, then pulled away quickly as if it had burned him. No, he wouldn't go in there. Not today. Not ever. That night he barely slept. His mind kept circling around the idea of a stranger in his home. What if she tried to talk about Lily? What if she saw the photos he'd turned face down because looking at his daughter's smile was too painful? What if she judged him for the man he'd become? The next afternoon, Tom's truck appeared again, this time with a passenger. Jack watched from the window as a woman climbed out. She was maybe in her late 40s with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She moved with calm confidence, not rushing, not hesitant. She wore practical clothes and carried a canvas bag. Tom brought her to the door. "Jack, this is Elena Rodriguez." "Elena, my brother Jack." Elena extended her hand. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for this opportunity." Her handshake was firm, her eyes steady. She didn't smile too much or try to act overly friendly. Jack appreciated that even as he resented her presence. "It's just Jack," he said gruffly, "and it's twice a week. Mondays and Thursdays. You cook enough food that I can reheat for other meals. Basic cleaning." "That's it." "Understood," Elena said simply. "I'm not looking for company or conversation. This is just a job." "I understand," she repeated, and something in her tone made Jack think she really did understand. They agreed on a rate. Tom helped Elena get a feel for the kitchen layout where things were stored. Jack stood awkwardly to the side, not sure where to be or what to do with himself. He caught Elena's gaze sweeping across the cabin, taking in the dust, the disrepair, the general sense of neglect. Then her eyes landed on the mantel, where several photo frames sat face down. She didn't comment, didn't ask, just registered it and moved on. Before she left, Elena turned to Jack. "I lost my husband 18 months ago. Roberto was a firefighter. Died saving 3 people from a burning building." She paused. "I'm not here to fix your grief, Jack. I'm here to cook and clean. But I want you to know I understand what it's like when the world expects you to move on, and you're not ready." Jack didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded stiffly. After they left, the cabin felt different somehow. Less like a sanctuary and more like what it really was, a place where a man was slowly disappearing. Jack looked around at the mess, the decay, the evidence of his surrender to grief. He picked up one of the face-down frames and turned it over before he could stop himself. Lily grinned back at him from the photo, wearing her favorite purple hiking jacket, standing at a mountain summit with her arms spread wide like she could hug the whole sky. The pain in his chest was immediate and crushing. He quickly set the frame back down, face down again, and walked away. Monday would come soon enough. Then this woman, this Elena, would invade his carefully constructed isolation. Jack told himself it was temporary, just until his shoulder healed, just until he could manage on his own again. He told himself a lot of things that night, but deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge, something small and scared whispered that maybe he couldn't keep living like this. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe it had been 3 years too long already. Elena arrived Monday morning at exactly 9 o'clock. Jack had been awake since 5, nervous in a way that annoyed him. He'd cleaned up the worst of the mess, then felt stupid for doing it since she was coming to clean anyway. When her small sedan pulled up, he watched from the window like a suspicious cat. She came in carrying 2 canvas grocery bags and that same calm energy from before. "Good morning, Jack. I brought some basics to get started. I'll make a list of what else you might need." Jack grunted something that might have been a greeting and immediately felt awkward. Where was he supposed to be while she worked? He couldn't just stand there watching her. But leaving felt weird too, like he was abandoning his post. Elena solved the problem for him. "Why don't you show me where everything is? Then you can go do whatever you normally do. I'll stay out of your way." So Jack gave her a quick tour. Pantry here, cleaning supplies there, his preferences for how things should be organized. Elena listened carefully, asked practical questions, didn't pry. When he mentioned his injured shoulder, she simply nodded and said she'd avoid storing things on high shelves for now. Then she got to work, and Jack retreated to the porch with a book he wouldn't actually read. But he could smell everything. Fresh vegetables being chopped. Spices he hadn't used in years. Something baking that made his stomach growl loudly enough to embarrass him. After a few hours, Elena appeared at the door. "I've made chicken stew, baked mac and cheese, and a pot of rice and beans. All in containers marked with reheating instructions. There's also cornbread and a salad for today. The cleaning's done except for the closed room. I assumed that was off limits." Jack nodded, relieved she hadn't tried to enter Lily's room. "That's fine, good." Before she left, Elena set a small jar on the counter. "My grandmother's recipe, arnica and cayenne salve, for your shoulder. Rub it in twice a day. It won't fix everything, but it'll help with the pain and swelling." Jack stared at the jar. "You didn't have to do that. I know, Elena said simply. See you Thursday. That night, Jack ate the chicken stew. It was the best thing he'd tasted in months, maybe years. Rich and warm, with flavors that made him remember what caring about food felt like. He ate 2 bowls, then felt guilty for enjoying it. Thursday came. Elena arrived, worked efficiently, left more food. This time a roasted chicken, potato soup, and something she called picadillo. She also left another small jar, this one containing tea. For sleep, she explained at the door. If you need it. Jack didn't thank her, but he used the salve that night. And the next night, his shoulder did feel better, though he'd never admit it out loud. The 3rd week, Jack found himself actually in the kitchen while Elena cooked. Not talking, just there, drinking coffee and watching her work. She moved with the kind of confidence that comes from years of feeding people you love. Her hands were quick and sure as she chopped vegetables, measured spices by instinct rather than measuring spoons. My grandmother taught me to cook, Elena said quietly, not looking up from her work. She said food was how we take care of people when words aren't enough. Jack didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. By the 4th week, something had shifted. Jack stayed in the kitchen more often. He started asking small questions. Where did she learn that technique? What was that spice? Elena answered without making a big deal of his curiosity. One Thursday, as she was making tamales, she told him about Roberto. He was one of those people who ran toward danger while everyone else ran away. 20 years as a firefighter. I used to hate every time he left for work, wondering if he'd come home. She pressed masa into a corn husk with practiced hands. The cancer was almost worse because he couldn't fight it the way he fought fires. He felt helpless, and how long? Jack asked, surprising himself by speaking. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Fast, they said. Like that was supposed to be comforting. Elena's hands never stopped moving. He made me promise I wouldn't stop living, that I'd take care of our son Diego and myself, that I'd laugh again. She finally looked up. Some days I keep that promise. Some days I don't. Jack understood that more than she knew. The next Monday, something happened that changed everything. Jack walked into the kitchen and found Elena standing very still, holding a piece of paper. Her face was wet with tears she was trying to hide. Sorry, she said quickly, wiping her eyes. I found this stuck behind the cabinet. I'll put it back. It was a drawing. Lily had made it when she was 14. A colored pencil sketch of the cabin surrounded by pine trees, with a family of deer in the foreground. She'd signed it with her name and the date, along with a note. Home is wherever Dad is. Jack's throat closed up. He hadn't seen this drawing in years. Had forgotten it existed. That's beautiful work, Elena said softly. Your daughter? The word hung in the air. Daughter. Jack hadn't heard anyone say it in so long. He managed a nod. What was her name? Lily. It came out rough, barely a whisper. Elena carefully placed the drawing on the counter between them. Would you tell me about her? Every instinct screamed at Jack to shut down, to walk away, to rebuild his walls. But something about Elena's own tears, about the way she'd said your daughter, instead of asking if he had kids, made him stay. She was 16, Jack heard himself say. Wanted to be a park ranger. She loved these mountains more than anything. Was always drawing them, photographing them, studying the wildlife. His voice cracked. I was leading a group hike. Didn't see the warning signs. There was a rock slide and He couldn't finish. Elena didn't move toward him or try to touch him. She just stood there, present, listening. It was 3 years ago, Jack continued. My wife Linda couldn't even look at me after. She left within 6 months. Said being near me was too painful. Everyone said time would heal it, but they're liars. It doesn't heal. You just get better at pretending. Yes, Elena said simply. You do. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Elena spoke again. Roberto made me promise I wouldn't let grief kill me. But some days I think it's killing me anyway, just slowly. I go through the motions for Diego. I work, I cook, I smile when I'm supposed to. But inside, I'm stuck in that hospital room watching him take his last breath. Jack looked at her properly for the first time, really looked, and saw someone who understood, not because she'd read about grief or studied it, but because she was living in it too. Does it get easier? He asked, hating how desperate he sounded. I don't know yet, Elena admitted, but I think hiding from it doesn't help. I tried that for a while. Kept Roberto's clothes in the closet, his toothbrush by the sink. Pretended he'd just gone on a long trip. Diego finally told me I was scaring him. That I was there, but not there. Jack thought about his closed door, his face-down pictures, his 3 years of running away from everything. I've been doing the same thing. I know, Elena said gently. I could tell the first day I met you. Something broke open in Jack's chest. Not healed, but cracked, letting in the smallest bit of light. When Elena left that day, Jack picked up Lily's drawing and really looked at it. The detail she'd put into every tree, every shadow. The love in every line. He remembered the day she'd given it to him, how proud she'd been. He carefully propped it up on the mantel. Just one picture. Just one small step. The following week, Elena mentioned her car was making strange noises, but she couldn't afford to fix it yet. I need to drop Diego off at his job at the grocery store first, if that's okay. It'll make me a few minutes late. Bring him here, Jack found himself saying. I'll give him a ride down the mountain after. Elena looked surprised. Are you sure? Jack wasn't sure of anything, but he nodded anyway. Diego turned out to be 17, polite but quiet, clearly unsure what to make of his mother's strange employer. He had Roberto's dark eyes and Elena's steady way of moving. While Elena cooked, Diego stood on the porch looking at the mountains. Jack joined him, awkward but trying. Your mom says you work at Milton's grocery, Jack said. Yes, sir. Stocking and bagging mostly. Saving for community college. What do you want to study? Diego hesitated. Environmental science, maybe. I like the outdoors, but I've never really been out in it much. Mom's too worried about safety, especially after Dad died. Jack understood Elena's fear, but he also understood something else. You can't live your whole life afraid, he said, more to himself than to Diego. When it was time to drive Diego down the mountain, the kid asked careful questions about the terrain, the wildlife, the seasons. Jack found himself answering, then teaching, pointing out animal tracks, explaining how to read the weather and the sky. At the store, Diego thanked him sincerely. Could you maybe teach me more sometime? About the mountains? Jack's immediate instinct was to refuse. Getting close to a teenager, teaching them about the wilderness, it felt too much like what he'd lost, but he saw Elena's hope in Diego's eyes. Maybe, Jack said. We'll see. That night, Jack turned 2 more pictures face up on the mantel. Lily at age 10, missing her front teeth. Lily at 15, holding her first camera. He stared at them for a long time, then did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He talked to her. I met someone today who reminds me of you, he whispered to the photo. Same curiosity about everything. Same love for these mountains. I don't know if I can do this, teach someone again. But maybe you'd want me to try. The photos didn't answer, but Jack felt something shift inside him anyway. Like a door he'd locked tight was starting just barely to open. The storm warning started on Tuesday, but nobody expected it to hit as hard or as fast as it did. Jack was checking his weather radio when Elena called. Jack, the forecast looks bad. Do you want me to skip Thursday? Jack looked at his empty fridge, then at his calendar. He'd been looking forward to Thursday more than he wanted to admit. The storm's not supposed to hit until Friday. You should be fine. He was wrong. Elena arrived Thursday morning under dark, heavy clouds. I'm going to work fast today, she said, already unpacking groceries. That sky doesn't look friendly. Jack should have sent her home immediately. But he didn't. Maybe he was selfish. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he just wanted her company a little longer. Whatever the reason, he stayed quiet and let her work. By 11 o'clock, the first snowflakes fell. By noon, it was coming down so thick Jack couldn't see 20 feet beyond his porch. The wind picked up, howling around the cabin like something alive and angry. Elena tried her phone. No signal. The mountains blocked it even in good weather, and the storm made it impossible now. She looked out the window at the whiteout conditions and turned to Jack. I can't drive in this. I can't even see the road. I know, Jack said, his stomach tight with anxiety. Not about the storm. He'd weathered plenty of those. But about being trapped in close quarters with another person. About having his carefully controlled isolation shattered. You'll have to stay until it passes. Elena called Diego from Jack's landline. Jack could hear her reassuring her son, promising she was safe, telling him to stay with their neighbor, Mrs. Chen. When she hung up, Jack saw the worry in her eyes. He's scared, she said quietly. Reminds him of when Roberto was dying. Every time I left the house, Diego was terrified I wouldn't come back. He'll be okay, Jack offered awkwardly. Mrs. Chen will take care of him. I know, but knowing something and feeling something are different things. The storm raged all afternoon. Jack tried to give Elena space, but the cabin wasn't that big. They kept ending up in the same rooms, moving around each other like nervous dancers who'd forgotten the steps. Around dinner time, Elena started cooking despite Jack's protests. "We need to eat," she said practically. "And I need something to do with my hands or I'll lose my mind worrying about Diego." Jack understood that. "Can I help?" Elena looked surprised, then pleased. "You can chop vegetables." So Jack found himself standing at the counter, chopping onions and peppers while Elena seasoned chicken. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. The kitchen grew warm and fragrant. Outside, the storm screamed, but inside, something peaceful was building. "My grandmother used to say cooking was prayer," Elena said, stirring a pot. "That when you cook for someone with love, you're blessing them." "I don't know if I believe in that stuff anymore," Jack admitted. "After Lily died, I couldn't understand how God or the universe or whatever could let that happen. I felt the same way when Roberto got sick. He was such a good man, spent his whole life saving people. It seemed cruel that he couldn't be saved." Elena tasted the sauce, added a pinch of something. "But then I realized maybe it's not about some big plan. Maybe it's just about what we do with the time we have, how we treat each other, the love we share before it's too late." Jack stopped chopping. "I wasted 3 years. "You survived 3 years," Elena corrected gently. "That's not nothing." They ate dinner by the fireplace. The food was incredible, but more than that, the company was something Jack hadn't realized he'd been starving for. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the mountains, Elena's grandmother's recipes. But as the night wore on and the storm continued, the conversation went deeper. Jack told her about his life before, how he'd been a park ranger for 25 years, how he'd loved teaching people about the wilderness, seeing their faces light up when they spotted their first elk or identified a bird by its call, how Lily had been his shadow from the time she could walk, following him everywhere, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. "She was better at it than I was," Jack said, staring into the fire. "She had this gift for making people feel safe and excited at the same time. She would have been an amazing ranger." "Tell me about the day it happened," Elena said softly, "if you can." Jack had never told anyone the full story. Not Tom, not the therapist Linda had forced him to see once. But somehow in this snowbound cabin with this woman who understood loss, the words came. It was supposed to be an easy hike. I'd done it 100 times. But I missed the signs. The loose rocks. The recent rainfall making the slopes unstable. I was distracted talking to one of the other kids about college applications. His voice shook. We came around a bend and I heard it. That sound like thunder, but worse. I saw Lily's face when she realized what was happening. She wasn't even scared for herself. She was scared for the other kids. She started pushing them away from the path. Jack stopped, breathing hard. Elena waited, not pushing, just present. The rocks took her so fast. 1 second she was there and then she wasn't. We found her an hour later. The paramedics said it was instant, that she didn't suffer. Like that was supposed to make it better. Jack wiped his eyes roughly. I was supposed to protect her. That's the whole point of being a father. And I failed. You didn't fail, Elena said firmly. You made a judgment call that seemed right at the time. The mountain did what mountains do. It wasn't your fault. Then whose fault was it? Jack's voice broke. Who do I blame? Who do I hate? No one. That's the hardest part. Roberto didn't ask for cancer. Lily didn't ask for a rock slide. Sometimes terrible things just happen and we're left holding all this anger with nowhere to put it. Jack looked at her. What did you do with yours? I screamed a lot. Broke some dishes. Cried until I thought I'd run out of tears, then cried more. Elena smiled sadly. Eventually I realized I could either let the anger destroy me, or I could try to live in a way that would honor Roberto. He wanted me happy. He wanted Diego to grow up with a mother who was present. Not just physically there, but actually living. How do you do that? How do you just decide to live again? You don't just decide once. You decide every single day. Some days you fail. Some days you can't get out of bed, but you keep trying. Elena turned to face him fully. Jack, Lily wouldn't want this for you. She wouldn't want you hiding up here, turning into a ghost. You didn't know her, Jack said, but there was no heat in it. No, but I know love. And I know that when you really love someone, you want them to be happy, even after you're gone. especially after you're gone." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the fire burn down. Finally, Elena spoke again. "I need to tell you something about why I really took this job." Jack looked at her, curious. "Diego is pulling away from life the same way you did. Ever since Roberto died, he's been going through the motions. School, work, home. He doesn't see friends, doesn't do anything fun. He's scared to get attached to anything because he's terrified of losing it." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "When your brother told me about you, about a man who'd lost his daughter and isolated himself, I thought maybe if Diego saw that even someone as far gone as you could come back to life, maybe he'd have hope." Jack should have been offended by far gone, but he wasn't. It was true. "I'm not sure I'm the best example," he said. "You're better than you think. Look at what you've done in just these few weeks. You're talking again. Eating real food. You gave Diego a ride and didn't hate it. You turned your daughter's pictures back up." Elena reached over and touched his hand briefly. "You're coming back to life, Jack. Slowly, but you're doing it." Jack stared at her hand on his. This simple human contact he'd denied himself for so long. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of caring about people again. Of teaching Diego about the mountains and something happening to him. Of letting you into my life and then losing you too. I can't go through that again." "You might anyway," Elena said honestly. "That's the risk of being human. We love people knowing we'll eventually lose them. But the alternative is this half-life you've been living, and that's not really living at all." The storm continued through the night. They talked for hours, sharing stories about Lily and Roberto, about dreams they'd had and dreams they'd lost. Around midnight, Jack went to the closed door of Lily's room. His hand hovered over the handle. "I haven't been in here since the day after her funeral," he admitted. "Do you want to go in now?" Elena asked. Jack nodded. He turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was exactly as Lily had left it. Her hiking boots sat by the bed, still muddy from their last hike together. Her walls were covered with maps, photos, drawings of wildlife. Her desk held stacks of journals where she'd recorded every plant, animal, and geological formation she'd encountered. Jack's legs went weak. Elena caught his arm, steadied him. "She had so much life in her," Jack whispered, picking up one of the journals. "So many plans. She wanted to work in Yellowstone first, then maybe Alaska. She wanted to write a book about teaching kids to love nature." He flipped through pages of Lily's handwriting, her observations, her dreams. Elena stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. She wrote beautifully. You can tell how much she loved this work. Jack found an entry from a week before the accident. "Dad said today that I'm a natural teacher, that I make people feel brave enough to try new things. I want to be like him when I grow up. I want to help people discover how amazing the world is." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He sat down on Lily's bed and cried, really cried for the first time since the funeral. Elena sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders, letting him break apart. "She wanted to be like me," Jack said between sobs. "And look what I became. Look what I did with the life she didn't get to have." "Then change it," Elena said firmly. "Starting tomorrow. Starting right now. Don't waste another day hiding from the world she loved so much." Jack cried until he had nothing left. Then he and Elena sat in Lily's room, looking at her treasures, talking about the girl she'd been and the woman she would have become. As dawn broke and the storm began to clear, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. Maybe the first small seed of hope that life could be more than just surviving. Elena fell asleep in the chair in Lily's room around 5 in the morning. Jack covered her with a blanket and stood looking at the two of them, this woman who'd crashed into his isolation and his daughter's preserved dream. "I'm going to try," he whispered to Lily's photo on the nightstand. "I'm going to try to live again, for both of us." Outside, the sun rose over fresh snow, making everything look clean and new, like the world was offering him a second chance. And for the first time in 3 years, Jack thought he might actually take it. The Saturday after the storm, Jack did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He invited people to dinner. Not Elena coming to work. Actual guests. Elena and Diego coming to his home as friends. He was nervous enough to clean the cabin twice and burn the first batch of cornbread. When their car pulled up, Jack wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and tried to remember how to be a normal host. Diego stepped out first, looking around at the mountains with obvious awe. Elena followed, carrying a basket that smelled like heaven. "I know you cooked," she said at the door, "but I brought my grandmother's flan for dessert. It's tradition." The evening started awkward, all of them trying too hard. But then Diego asked about the topographical maps on Jack's wall and something clicked. Jack found himself pulling out more maps, showing Diego how to read elevation changes, water sources, trail difficulty. "Could you teach me to navigate with these?" Diego asked, his eyes bright with genuine interest. "Like really teach me?" Jack hesitated. Teaching meant responsibility. It meant getting involved, getting attached. It meant risking his heart again. But then he remembered what he'd promised Lily in her room. To live, yeah, Jack said. "I could do that." Elena caught Jack's eye over Diego's head and smiled, and Jack felt something warm spread through his chest. Something that might have been happiness trying to remember how to exist. They ate the dinner Jack had cooked, pot roast with vegetables, because it was one of the few things he remembered how to make. It was slightly overdone, but nobody complained. Diego talked about school, about his job, about how he wanted to do something meaningful with his life, but wasn't sure what yet. "Your mom says you're interested in environmental science," Jack said. "Yeah, but I don't know if I'm smart enough for that kind of work." Diego looked down at his plate. "I'm not great at school. Dad was the smart one. I'm just average." "Your father ran into burning buildings," Elena said firmly. "That took a different kind of intelligence. Courage, quick thinking, the ability to stay calm under pressure. You have all of those things." "She's right," Jack added. "Some of the best rangers I worked with barely graduated high school. But they understood the land, understood people, had good instincts. That's what matters." Diego looked up, hope flickering across his face. "Would you really teach me? About wilderness stuff?" Jack nodded. "We'll start next weekend. Basic skills first. Fire starting, water purification, reading signs. Then we'll work up to more advanced navigation and survival techniques." That night, after Elena and Diego left, Jack sat on his porch under the stars and felt something close to peace. He'd taken a step forward instead of back. He'd opened his door to people. He'd committed to teaching again, to passing on knowledge Lily would have loved to share. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Elena still came Mondays and Thursdays, but now it felt less like a job and more like friendship. She'd cook while Jack kept her company, and they'd talk about everything and nothing. She told him about her struggles with the mortgage, about Diego's college applications, about how hard it was to date as a widow because nobody wanted to compete with a dead hero. Jack found himself sharing more too, about Linda, his ex-wife, and how their marriage had been struggling even before Lily died. About his brother Tom being the responsible one, the successful one, while Jack was the dreamer who'd chosen mountains over money. About how much he missed his work, missed teaching, missed feeling useful. On Saturdays, Diego came up the mountain and Jack taught him everything he knew. They started with basics: how to build a proper fire even in wet conditions, how to purify water from streams, how to identify edible plants and dangerous ones. Diego was a quick learner, careful and thorough, writing everything down in a notebook that reminded Jack painfully of Lily's journals. But it was a good pain, the kind that meant healing, not harm. One Saturday, about 6 weeks after that first dinner, something shifted. Jack was teaching Diego about animal tracking when the kid suddenly asked, "What happened to your daughter?" Jack's first instinct was to shut down, to redirect, to protect himself from the pain. But Diego's face was open, genuinely curious, not prying. "She died in a rock slide," Jack said quietly. 3 years ago. I was leading the hike. It was my fault. Mom told me it was an accident." "Does that make it better?" Jack asked, more harshly than he intended. Diego considered this seriously. "My dad died saving people. Everyone said he was a hero. But I was so angry at him for dying, for leaving us, for choosing strangers over staying alive for me." He traced a deer track with his finger. "Mom said it's okay to feel both things. Proud and angry, grateful and abandoned. That grief is complicated." Jack stared at this 17-year-old kid who somehow understood things Jack was still learning. "Your mom's a smart woman," Jack finally said. "She likes you," Diego said casually, still focused on the tracks. "Like really likes you. She smiles differently when she talks about coming up here." Jack's heart did something strange in his chest. "I like her too. Good. She deserves someone who makes her happy." Diego looked up then, his eyes serious beyond his years. "Just don't hurt her, okay? She's been through enough." I would never intentionally hurt her, Jack promised. Intentionally is the problem, Diego said wisely. Dad didn't intend to die and leave us. You didn't intend for your daughter to die, but intentions don't always matter. The conversation stuck with Jack for days. He started noticing things about Elena he'd been trying not to notice. The way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. The graceful way her hands moved when she cooked. The kindness that seemed to pour out of her naturally, healing everyone she touched. He was falling for her, maybe had been for weeks. The realization terrified him. One Thursday, he worked up the courage to ask her to stay for dinner instead of just cooking it. I mean a real dinner. With me, like a date maybe? Elena's smile was soft and pleased. I'd like that, Jack. So they had dinner together, just the two of them, and it felt natural and right. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Elena told him she'd been afraid she'd never feel attraction again. That part of her had died with Roberto. But then you turned around in your kitchen one day, she said, and the light was hitting you just right, and I thought, oh no. I'm in trouble, Jack laughed, actually laughed. I thought the same thing when you made those tamales. I realized I was looking forward to Thursdays more than anything else in my life. They moved closer together on the couch, tentative, testing. When Jack finally kissed her, it felt like coming home and starting over all at the same time. But the happiness scared Jack. It felt like tempting fate. Like the universe would notice he was content and take it away. His fears got worse as the weeks went on and his feelings deepened. Elena and Diego became regular fixtures in his life. Diego was learning so fast, asking to spend more time on the mountain, talking excitedly about maybe becoming a park ranger himself, and that's when Jack's fear turned into panic. They were on a hike, Jack teaching Diego about spotting weather changes in the sky. When Diego said, I want to do what your daughter wanted to do, be a ranger, teach people, make a difference. Something in Jack's chest locked up tight. Diego wanted to follow Lily's dream, the exact dream that had led her to that mountain, to that hike, to her death. What if something happened to Diego? What if Jack taught him to love the wilderness and it took him too? What if Jack failed another kid, another person he cared about? That night Jack barely slept. By morning his fear had grown into something dark and consuming. He called Elena and canceled their next dinner. Then he canceled Diego's next lesson. Then the one after that. Elena showed up on a Thursday, concerned. Jack, what's going on? Diego's devastated. He thinks he did something wrong. He didn't, Jack said, unable to look at her. I just can't do this. Can't do what? Any of it. Teach him, date you, pretend I can have a normal life. Jack's voice was rising now, panic making him cruel. Everyone I love dies, Elena, my daughter, my marriage. Everything I touch turns to dust. I can't do that to you and Diego. Elena's face went hard. So that's it? You're just going to run away again because you're scared? I'm not running. I'm protecting you. That's garbage and you know it. Elena's voice shook with anger. You're protecting yourself. You'd rather be alone and miserable than risk being happy and losing it. You don't understand, Jack said desperately. I understand perfectly. You think you're the only person who's ever been scared. You think I'm not terrified every single day. Elena's eyes were blazing now. Every time Diego leaves the house, I'm scared. Every time I start to feel happy with you, I'm scared. That's what it means to be alive after loss. You're scared all the time, but you do it anyway because the alternative is this half-dead existence you've been living. At least in that existence, nobody else gets hurt. Jack shot back. Except Diego, who you've been giving hope to. Except me, who you've been letting fall in love with you. Except yourself. Elena grabbed her coat. You know what your daughter would think of this? She'd be ashamed. She'd hate that you're using her death as an excuse to give up on living. The words hit Jack like a slap. Don't you dare tell me what Lily would think. Someone needs to because you've built this whole shrine to her memory while ignoring what she actually stood for. She loved life, Jack. She loved teaching and helping people in these mountains, and you're spitting on everything she believed in by hiding up here. Elena headed for the door, then turned back. When you decide to stop being a coward, call me. Until then, stay away from me and my son. We've had enough loss without you adding to it. She left, and Jack stood in his empty cabin feeling like he'd been gutted. He wanted to run after her. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to explain that he was just so damn scared of losing anyone else he loved. But he didn't move. He let her go. Because maybe she was right. Maybe everyone was better off without him. That night, Jack went into Lily's room and sat on her bed. "I messed it all up," he told her photo. "I had a chance to be happy again, and I destroyed it because I'm terrified." He picked up one of her journals and flipped through it randomly. His eyes landed on an entry from 2 years before her death. "Dad got scared today when I wanted to climb higher than we'd planned. He said it wasn't safe. I got mad and said he was being overprotective. But later he explained that fear means you have something worth protecting, that it's okay to be scared, as long as you don't let fear stop you from living. He said the bravest people aren't the ones who aren't afraid. They're the ones who are afraid but do the thing anyway." Jack read the words 3 times, hearing Lily's voice in his head. The bravest people are afraid but do the thing anyway. He'd been teaching Diego the same lesson without even realizing it. Be prepared. Be careful. But don't let fear of what might happen stop you from experiencing life. Jack sat in his daughter's room until dawn, reading her words, remembering who he used to be. Who he could be again if he was brave enough. Finally, as the sun rose, he knew what he had to do. He had to be brave enough to choose love over fear, even if it was terrifying, even if he might lose it all again. Because the alternative, this empty half-life, wasn't living at all. It was just slowly dying while his heart was still beating. Jack drove down the mountain at 7 in the morning, his truck rattling over roads he'd avoided for months. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break his ribs, but he kept driving. Elena's small house sat on a quiet street in town. Jack sat in his truck outside for 10 minutes, trying to find courage. Finally, he forced himself to walk to the door and knock. Diego answered. The kid's face went from surprise to something colder. "What do you want?" Diego asked, his voice flat. "I need to talk to your mom." "And to you?" "To apologize? She's getting ready for work, and I'm not interested in your apologies. Jack deserved that. I know I hurt you. Both of you. And I know sorry isn't enough, but please just give me 5 minutes." Diego stared at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. Elena appeared in the hallway, saw Jack, and her face went carefully blank. "What are you doing here?" "I was wrong," Jack said immediately. "About everything. I got scared and I ran and I hurt you both and I'm so sorry." "Scared of what?" Elena's voice was ice. "Of losing you. Of teaching Diego and something happening to him. Of being happy and having it ripped away again." Jack's voice broke. "After Lily died, I promised myself I'd never care about anyone that much again. Because the pain of losing her almost killed me. I thought if I just stayed alone, stayed numb, I'd be safe. And how did that work out?" Diego asked bitterly. "It didn't. I wasn't safe. I was just dead inside. Until you two came along and woke me back up." Jack looked at Elena. "You were right about everything you said. Lily would hate what I've become. She'd want me to live, to teach, to love. And instead I've been using her death as an excuse to give up." Elena's expression softened slightly, but her arms stayed crossed. "Why should we believe you won't just run again?" "Because I spent all night in Lily's room reading her journals, and I found something she wrote about bravery." Jack pulled out his phone where he'd photographed the entry. She said the bravest people aren't the ones who aren't afraid. They're the ones who are afraid but do the thing anyway. He looked at Diego. "I'm terrified of teaching you and something going wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because you deserve a teacher who believes in you. Because Lily would want her dream passed on to someone who cares as much as she did." Then he turned to Elena. "And I'm terrified of loving you and losing you, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because these past few months with you have been the first time I've felt alive in 3 years. Because you're worth the risk." Diego looked at his mother. Elena looked at Jack, her eyes wet. "One chance," she said quietly. "That's all you get. You run again, we're done." "I won't run," Jack promised. "I'm done running." The next Saturday, Diego came back up the mountain. They were both nervous, both testing the waters. But as they hiked and Jack taught, the old rhythm came back. Diego asked questions. Jack answered. They tracked a fox together and identified 3 different types of pine trees. At the end of the day, Diego said, "I want to do this for real. Not just as a hobby. I want to become a ranger." Jack's chest tightened, but he pushed through the fear. "Then we'll make it happen. I'll help you prepare." Over the next few months, Jack did something he'd never imagined doing again. He went to the local ranger station and talked to his old supervisor, Carl. "Jack Morrison," Carl said, surprised. "Heard you'd become a hermit." "I did. But I'm trying to come back." Jack explained about Diego, about wanting to help kids learn about wilderness preservation. I was thinking maybe I could volunteer, lead some educational hikes, teach basic outdoor skills. Carl studied him carefully. You sure you're ready for that? No, Jack admitted. But I'm going to do it anyway. Carl smiled. That's the Jack I remember. Let me see what I can set up. Within a month, Jack had a small program running. 8 teenagers, including Diego, meeting every other Saturday for wilderness education. Jack taught them everything: how to read topographical maps, how to identify animal tracks, how to build emergency shelters, how to respect and preserve the land. One of the kids, a quiet girl named Amy, reminded Jack painfully of Lily. She was shy at first, uncertain of herself but absolutely fascinated by nature. Jack found himself giving her extra encouragement, helping her find her confidence. Elena watched him teach sometimes, saw him come alive in a way he hadn't been before. One evening after the kids had gone home, she kissed him and said, "I'm so proud of you." "I'm still scared every time I take them out," Jack admitted. "Every time we go near anything remotely dangerous. But you do it anyway. That's what matters." Jack and Elena's relationship deepened slowly, carefully. They'd both been burned by loss, and they treated their new love with the respect it deserved. No rushing. No pretending the past didn't exist. Just two people choosing each other day by day. Diego flourished under Jack's teaching. He applied to the forestry program at the state university and got accepted with a scholarship. Elena cried when the letter came, proud and scared in equal measure. "I'm going to lose him," she said to Jack that night. "He'll go to school, become a ranger, go off into the wilderness, and I'll just worry." "Yeah," Jack said. "But you'll also watch him live his dream. That's what parents do. We let them go even though it kills us." Elena leaned into him. "When did you get so wise?" "When I finally stopped running from life." Then came the day that tested everything. Jack was leading his group on a training hike, teaching them advanced navigation. They were near a steep section when Amy, trying to get a better view, stepped too close to the edge. The ground crumbled under her feet. She slipped. For Jack, time stopped. He was back 3 years ago watching Lily slide, frozen in horror. His body locked up. His breath stopped. All he could see was his daughter falling over and over. But then Diego moved. Calm, efficient, using exactly what Jack had taught him. He secured his own position, reached out, grabbed Amy's arm, talked her through finding footholds. Together with another student, they pulled her back to safety. Amy was shaking but unhurt. The other kids clustered around her, making sure she was okay. And Jack stood there, his whole body trembling, feeling like he might collapse. "Mr. Morrison?" Diego was suddenly beside him. "Are you okay?" Jack couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The panic attack hit him full force. Diego recognized it immediately. "Everyone take a water break," he called to the group. Then quieter to Jack, "Come sit down. Breathe with me." For 10 minutes, this 17-year-old kid talked Jack through a panic attack with patience and calm. When Jack could finally breathe normally again, he was mortified. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I froze. I should have been the one helping her, but I just froze." "But you taught me how to help her," Diego said firmly. "That's what matters. You prepared us. That's your job as a teacher." The other kids had gathered around, concerned. Amy came over, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was stupid. I should have been more careful." Jack shook his head. "You made a mistake. That's human. But you stayed calm, listened to instructions, and got yourself out. That's what I've been teaching you." He looked at all of them. "I need to tell you something. About why I stopped being a ranger." So Jack told them about Lily, about the accident, about his fear and guilt, about how proud he was that Diego had handled the situation the way he did, because it proved Jack's teaching worked. "My daughter wanted to be a ranger," Jack said, his voice thick. "She wanted to teach kids like you to love and protect these mountains. I can't bring her back, but I can honor her by continuing what she started." Amy wiped her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when you were scared." After the hike, Jack called Elena and told her what happened. She drove up immediately, held him while he shook. "I almost lost it," Jack said. "I saw Amy falling and all I could see was Lily." "But you didn't lose it. And more importantly, Diego knew exactly what to do because you taught him well." Elena pulled back to look at him. "Don't you see? This is you succeeding, not failing. You prepared them. You gave them the skills they needed. That's what a good teacher does. Jack let her words sink in. She was right. He hadn't saved Amy himself, but he'd created a situation where she could be saved, where kids could learn to save themselves and each other. That night, Jack went to Lily's room and sat with her journals. "Your dream is alive," he told her photo. "These kids are learning everything you wanted to teach. Diego is going to be an amazing ranger. Amy is going to overcome her fear and probably do great things. And I'm finally doing what you would have wanted." 6 months later, Jack stood in front of a small crowd at the ranger station, Elena beside him, Diego in the front row with the other students. Carl was presenting Jack with a plaque honoring his volunteer work and his newly official position as Youth Wilderness Education Coordinator. "Jack Morrison taught a generation of rangers before he left us," Carl said. "We're honored to have him back teaching the next generation." The applause felt surreal to Jack. A year ago, he'd been alone in a cabin, slowly dying inside. Now he was surrounded by people he loved, doing work that mattered, feeling alive. After the ceremony, Diego pulled him aside. "I have something for you." He handed Jack a wrapped package. Inside was a framed photo. It showed Jack and Diego on a mountain summit, teaching the group of students. But in the corner, carefully edited in, was a photo of Lily in her hiking gear, smiling at the camera. "Because she should be part of this," Diego said simply. "She started it. You're continuing it. And someday I'll continue it too." Jack couldn't speak. He just pulled Diego into a hug, this kid who'd become like a son to him. That evening, Jack and Elena sat on his porch watching the sunset. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "I have something to ask you," Jack said, his heart racing. Elena turned to look at him, curious. "These mountains took my daughter from me, but they also brought you to me. They taught me about loss and then about healing." Jack took her hand. "I don't have a ring yet, and I know we're both scared. But I love you, Elena, and I want to build a life with you and Diego if you'll have me." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. I'm terrified, but I'm asking anyway." "Then my answer is yes. Absolutely yes." They got married 6 months later on the mountain at sunrise. It was a small ceremony. Tom officiated. Diego stood beside Jack. Elena's family came. The kids from Jack's program were there. And on the makeshift altar, surrounded by wildflowers, sat a photo of Lily and a photo of Roberto. In his vows, Jack promised to honor Lily's memory by living fully, by loving completely, by never taking a single day for granted. Elena promised the same in memory of Roberto. "We've both loved and lost," Jack said, "but we're choosing to love again anyway, because that's what it means to be brave." The reception was at the cabin, which had been transformed from a place of isolation to a home full of life. Music played. People laughed. Amy showed Jack her acceptance letter to environmental science program. Diego talked excitedly about his upcoming internship at Yellowstone. As the sun set, Jack found himself standing by Lily's photo on the mantel. Elena came up beside him, wrapped her arm around his waist. "Do you think she'd be happy?" Jack asked quietly. "I think she'd be thrilled." "You're living, Jack, really living. That's all any parent wants for their child." They looked out at the celebration, at the life they'd built together from the ashes of their grief. "Thank you," Jack said, turning to Elena, "for not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself." "Thank you for being brave enough to try again," Elena replied. Diego approached them, grinning. "Come on, you two. They're about to cut the cake." As Jack followed his new wife and the boy who'd become his son back to the party, he felt Lily's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. Not sad or lost, but proud and free. He'd kept his promise. He was living again. And in living, he was honoring everyone he'd lost by making the most of everything he'd found. The mountains that had taken so much from him had given him even more in return. A second chance. A new family. A reason to wake up every morning and choose life over fear. Jack looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, maybe Lily was watching. Maybe Roberto too. Maybe they were both smiling, glad that the people they left behind had found each other. "I'm happy," Jack realized with surprise. "For the first time in years, I'm actually happy." Elena squeezed his hand. "Me too." And in that moment, surrounded by love and laughter in the mountains that had witnessed both his worst pain and his greatest healing, Jack finally understood something his daughter had known all along. Life is precious not because it lasts forever, but because it doesn't. Every moment is a gift. Every connection matters. Every day you choose love over fear is a day you truly live, and Jack was done just surviving. He was finally fully, completely alive. The cabin that had been his prison became his home. The mountains that had taken his daughter became the place where he found his purpose again, and the woman who came to cook his meals ended up feeding his soul. Sometimes the help we need comes wrapped in the love we never knew we were searching for. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to accept it, that love can transform everything.